Hey guys, it's Liv here, and in today's video, I wanted to discuss the new Pokemon Grafaiai and why I think this Pokemon has the potential to actually be really broken. If you guys enjoy this type of content though, and you want to see more, leave a like below and subscribe. And with that said as well, if you want to support the channel and go the extra mile, make sure you hit the channel membership button and the link in the description for several different perks that we have listed up there. But with that said, let's get into a few different things about the new Pokemon Grafaiai. So this is going to be a poison normal type Pokemon, and is referred to as the Toxic Monkey. And it honestly, I think its design looks amazing. As far as abilities go, we know it has Unburden and Poison Touch for certain. And if we look, it looks like it specifically is drawing and different things in the trailer that it's in, with those little drip poison things, I think is what it is. I think it's poison, but it drips from its fingers and it's based on what different berries it's eating. So it seems like it's going to be another artist Pokemon, which is actually the first one that I can think of offhand since we've gotten Smeargle, which is why I want to get into how broken I think that Grafaiai will be, and in general as well, what if Sketch was more distributed to other Pokemon. So right off the bat, we do need to look at Smeargle for this, of course. So if we cut over to Showdown real quick, we first do need to establish what Smeargle does and why the move Sketch would be broken on something that is not Smeargle. So right off the bat, we can see Smeargle has a pretty terrible stat line carried by a couple different factors. For one, it has a base 75 speed, which is actually not too awful, but everything else, at best, it's 55 HP, and then everything after that is below 50. So it's not really that great typing-wise or stat-wise. It's just a pure normal type that has every move in the game besides a couple that are mostly kept out of it just because of complications, like Hyperspace Fury can only be used by Hoopa and Bound, for example, and Dark Void can only be used by Darkrai. But otherwise, it's fair game. So Smeargle has a lot going for it though, in terms of moves such as hazards, like Stealth Rocks and Sticky Webs. You can get stuff like Spore, you can get stuff like Nuzzle, you get a lot of different utility. Even stuff like Fake Out that is typically considered a really good utility move in VGC, you could run it on Smeargle if you wanted to. The point being is that the sky is the limit. However, with this stat line with 20 in both your offenses, that limit is a lot lower. It's pretty much the equivalent of having a skyline in the middle of the ocean. It's not going to be that high. However, if we were to take a Pokemon that has actual stats, because Smeargle itself has a pretty low BST total that's under 300, and a Pokemon like Grafaiai, though, with even just a second stab with actual coverage, could be pretty amazing. Having a poison type that could hit different steel types, such as with Biscuit Fire or Flamethrower, already is really nice, and having the ability Unburden that Grafaiai has is also really good. Or even something like a Poison Touch with a Fake Out could again be really useful for this Pokemon. But let's take it a step further. Let's go over some other Pokemon that I feel like are pretty reasonable to jump to the conclusion of, if they were to get Sketch as a distributed move, would be broken, even just for other really terrible Pokemon. Now, I did choose some of these examples based on the sole merit that the Artist or Painter Trainer class uses these in-game. But I did want to compare just through a wide range of stat spreads for other Pokemon that, just like Grafaiai, could maybe have down the line gotten Sketch if it was a distributable move, and especially with Grafaiai potentially getting Sketch in Scarlet and Violet, if this was to become an egg move, how broken would these Pokemon be? So let's first start off with one of the worst for sure, Sudowoodo. Sudowoodo has one set that I think would be really good with Sturdy Custap. You'd have stuff like Endeavor and a Stalrock for priority, of course, and, well, Endeavor for utility and then a Stalrock for priority. With dual hazards, this is probably as good as Sudowoodo really gets, to be honest, but you could also maybe use Head Smash and Trick Room and throw on something like Ice Punch for Landorus, or just some steel coverage like Earthquake or Hammer Arm. The point being is I don't think this would be a very good option, but it's something at least. It is, to be fair, better than one of our other Pokemon, which I'll get into in a bit. But next up, though, we have Sunflora. Sunflora, really, the only way that you could actually make this work would be with Geomancy, in my opinion. But a lot of these special Pokemon could truthfully take advantage of Geomancy with great potential. Because Geomancy giving +2 in speed, special attack, and special defense for just running a Power Herb is honestly amazing. You could use this to clean really well, and especially with the sun up, you'd be hitting around the 700s for speed, versus with just Geomancy up or with just Chlorophyll, you'd be just barely outpacing 110, such as Gengar and Latios, since you would hit at max speed around 354, I want to say. The point being is that in the sun, this could honestly be a menace, but if you were a little bit afraid of maybe not having sun up, you could dish Weather Ball for Flamethrower and get the same effect. The point is this could be a not bad option, but it is kind of specific. Kricketoone's up next. It's really just normal Kricketoon with more utility. You now have Rapid Spin, you now have Spore, and you now have Fake Out. This is typically a pretty common one in the Artist and Painter class, especially in the Gen 4 games, so figured I should include it. Not much really changed about how you play Kricketune though. It's really just that it can do more of what it does best, which is be a lead and give some good utility. This is basically just the bug type equivalent of Smeargle though, and it would, in my opinion, actually be a little worse, considering the fact that you are a little bit slower with this since you are only 65 speed. And not only this, but Smeargle also gets Technician and Stab off of Fake Out and Rapid Spin, so you can't even really get the benefit of maybe you'll hit harder because you'll have Technician. No, because Smeargle can do that too. Well, to be fair, with 85 attack, I don't think the stat actually matters for Stab, but even still, it's a negligible damage difference. So we do have the Weezings up next, and these ones I actually do think could be pretty interesting. With Recover on Weezing alone with Levitate, you would actually get a really good defensive poison. You could still keep the same tropes such as Will-O-Wisp or Toxic on Weezing. On this personal set, I actually threw on Flamethrower and Sludge Bomb because your coverage is really amazing. And if Grafaiai has any actual bulk, this is a pretty similar set to what I would actually expect it to run. With Defog being on here mostly just because regular Weezing didn't actually get it and Galar Weezing did. However, if you do want another alternative move that's not Flamethrower, well, that's not Will-O-Wisp, Toxic Spikes, etc., regular Spikes could also be pretty good, and I decided to demonstrate this on Galar Weezing. Now, to be fair, both sets could really run either one. They're interchangeable between the two forms, but as far as a Weezing went, this would be pretty comparable between both forms, in my personal opinion. Next up, though, we're going to start breaking into the territory of Pokemon I think would actually be really destructive, with the first one being Mr. Mime. Now, this would be, in my opinion, just a better version of the Sunflora. And to be fair, I know I did mention that you could run Weather Ball, but you'd probably actually be better off running Blue Flare on that set in hindsight, because you do more damage since Blue Flare would be in the 130s. However, you do risk accuracy with that, so if you want a 100% accurate one, Weather Ball is still a good option in Sunflora, but Blue Flare is a solid shout as well. With this set, though, you would actually get amazing coverage with Psychic, Fire, and Fairy. With Psychic, it would mostly be for stuff like Toxapex, and with Ice Strike, you would also get around other setup mons, especially other potentially Sketch-using Pokemon. Since, again, the logic of this would be if Sketch was distributed, I'm sure if even just another Pokemon got it, you would have to worry about other Pokemon potentially going for Sketch, Geomancy, or even just Calm Minesweepers or Quiver Dance mons. So, with the Slash Strike in mind, it would be helpful for that, and with Blue Flare and Moonblast, your coverage would be pretty near perfect. 90 speed is pretty comparable to Xerneas. The special defense is also really good on this, so you could actually make this a really good special tank that could also clean really easily, in my opinion. With Filter, you'd even be really useful for taking hits better, since you take only 3/4 damage from super effective attacks. So, again, that's also really good, to be honest. But we do still have the other Mr. Mime, which I think would be pretty comparable. One thing I will say is that with Screen Cleaner plus the 100 speed, you could actually make this a really good Tail Glow mon. And I did want to show that versus just throwing Geomancy on every single special attacker. Mr. Mime Galar does with the speed actually pull this off, and with Ice, Fire, Electric, you hit pretty amazingly coverage-wise. Thunderbolt could really be for whatever, but I decided that for something like a Toxapex, this would be pretty good, and Bolt Beam as the general coverage set is a little bit better than throwing on maybe like an Earth Power there, but Earth Power is also definitely an option. The point being is that this sort of coverage set on a Pokemon with 100 speed would actually be really terrifying. Next up, though, we do have Mr. Rhyme. I will say I do think this would be a little bit worse in a lot of regards. However, one thing that I do think this would be a little bit better at would be baton passing. With the slightly added bulk, you could make this into actually a really good Clanger Soul Baton Pass user, especially for an Anything Goes tier or maybe a Battle Spot setting, because you would have Baton Pass, Spore, Clanger Soul, and Recover, and while you would be weak to rocks, which something like a Smeargle wouldn't necessarily be, your special defense is a lot higher, and your typing actually gives you some resists to stuff. For example, you'd be resistant to Ice, which is something with normal you'd really only be resistant to Ghost. The point being is that with Mr. Rhyme, it could be a little bit better of an option for baton passing than Smeargle would be. However, one thing I will give Smeargle is the fact that it does a Moody to help boost stats quicker. With Mr. Rhyme, though, the logic would be clearing the opponent's screens, which could actually have some merit, to be fair. Making sure your opponent doesn't have a Reflect Up or a Light Screen could be really useful with Baton Pass, since the goal is to do as much damage as quickly as possible, and making sure your opponent can't just Reflect your Light Screen through would be beneficial in my opinion. Next up, though, we do have Chinchino. This is a pretty cool idea, actually, I came up with Dragon Dance, Double Iron Bash, Force Palm, and Rapid Spin. Basically just trying to take advantage of Technician. With Rapid Spin, you're not only clearing hazards, but with Technician Boost, you'd be hitting for base 75 normal while doing so, which, after your stab boost as well, actually hits pretty usable. Not only this, but with Dragon Dance boosting your attack, you would not really miss out on just not running into high damage normal move, and you'd still get some good utility. With Double Iron Bash and Force Palm, this combination was mostly just to go for a Paraflinch. With Force Palm, you're going to take advantage of Technician while also being a good Steel and Rock killer. with base 90 because of that, and you'd be able to para stuff with 30% chance. And double iron bash with both hits plus the para would be also, again, really good at taking advantage of the para flinch strat. So I think with that in mind, that Changino would actually be a really good candidate for taking advantage of Sketch, as mostly just a Dragon Dance user. However, you could really run a lot of different coverage sets on Changino. The sky's the limit with this, and with the speed and offense that Changino has, with Skill Link and Technician, you can make both sets work really terrifyingly, in my opinion. Next up, though, we do have Sigilif. Sigilif's another cool one with Magic Guard. With this set, I decided with Quiver Dance, Aeroblast, Mind Blown, and Steam Eruption, you'd probably just go like really hard into Fizz Def and Speed on this set, and just try and Quiver Dance up and just go as offensive as possible, in my personal opinion. With Magic Guard, Life Orb, you'd be able to hit really hard, especially when you're +1 in special attack. And with Aeroblast, you're just doing more damage than you would with something like an Air Slash typically. With Mind Blown, it would mostly just be the fact that this is a really good steal killing option, which would be a resistance to both your stabs, and you're not going to take any recoil thanks to Magic Guard. As we see from Radical Red with Delphox, for example, this was a terrifying option before they pushed it back past the Elite 4 levels, so this is obviously going to also do really well on this offensive Psychic type with Magic Guard. And Steam Eruption I threw on here mostly because the only thing you wouldn't hit with Fire and Flying would be Rock types, and Steam Eruption would also be able to get you some Scald Burns, which off of a higher base attack stat than, well, a higher base damage move than Scald, having the 110 from Steam Eruption instead would be really beneficial because you're still getting the 30% chance to burn, and it's still good coverage. And on top of that as well, it would help you take physical defensive hits better, which I know that might seem obvious. You know, burn does obviously help dropping the opponent's physical attack stat, but when you're especially defensive setting up Pokemon, and in general you don't have the best physical defense stat in general, this could actually help you take hits a lot better. So I think that Sigilif could be a really terrifying Quiver Dance mon actually with Sketch distributed more. And if anything was to get it, I think it's actually one of the more likely Pokemon, considering it has a lot of different paint on its color scheme. But next up, though, we do have two more Pokemon. One comes from the Gen 6. This was a couple different painter teams on Gen 6, or it was on a couple different ones, being Mega Camerupt. Well, the teams did have regular Camerupt, to be fair, I will say, but I threw on Mega Camerupt because it's the one that would actually take advantage of this. However, you could basically run the same sort of set in a lower tier setting if you wanted to go with a regular Camerupt. Or you can honestly even just go with something like, for example, Dual Hazard, Slack Off, and a coverage option. But I decided on this set for Mega Camerupt specifically because even as far as Gen 9 goes, there will obviously be a Natdex metagame, and having a Mega Camerupt with Slack Off would honestly be terrifying. With Blue Flare, Earth Power, and Energy Ball, these are all Sheer Force boosted, which would be amazing on Trick Room teams, and you could honestly probably even see an OU viability on this Pokemon in my personal opinion, considering the fact that it would now no longer be really walled by waters, and Blue Flare would hit immensely harder than something like a Flamethrower would. With an extra base 40 before Sheer Force, well, I think 45 actually, no, it's a base 40 difference before Sheer Force, you would be able to just get off insane damage on anything it's not a resistance, and Mega Camerupt already had a tough time being switched around in general. Not only this, but with Slack Off, you could get some recovery back to make Camerupt actually a really good long-term option for Trick Room, which is something that a lot of Trick Room teams do have an issue with, is trying to keep their breakers alive for a very long time. It's why they throw on stuff like Healing Wish, for example, and Mega Camerupt having its own recovery could be really good as well in that regard, considering you would be able to pop the Slack Off before a lot of other Pokemon, and with how many switches Camerupt forces, you would get a really free recovery turn on a lot of different things. So Mega Camerupt, in my opinion, would be a really good candidate for Sketch in my personal eyes, but I do have one Pokemon I think would be obnoxiously better. Like, to put it in perspective, I think it is better than all these other Pokemon combined by several leagues. This was actually a Sketch Pokemon, well, an artist Pokemon that was from the Black and White Subway teams, and this would be something that I think would be the true high end of what I think in a really obnoxiously broken world Grafaiai could hit. It would depend on hidden ability and stats, but Porygon Z with, obviously this would be the very extreme end with Boom Burst, Focus Blast, Moongeist Beam, and Quiver Dance. Adaptability, you're just trying to hit everything obnoxiously, and with your stat line plus special offense, you could break through a lot of things. However, if you don't want to worry about trying to Quiver Dance up through something like a Blissey, you do have an option actually with adaptability to nearly guarantee the OHKO on Spidef Blissey with Explosion. Even if you're timid, you would do like 96% min versus versus Spidef Blissey. Or if you were to go with versus a bold set, you kill guaranteed after rocks because you do 88.4% min. I did sadly have to do these calcs. One of my friends was asking why not just throw on Explosion, and I sadly was proven that you do a lot of damage to Blissey with this because of fucking adaptability. But this is some of the high-end examples, obviously. Now, if Grafaiai was to get Sketch, where do I think it would actually sit on this scale? I think we'd be looking at something pretty comparable to either the Weezings or the Mr. Mimes as far as viability goes. Now, to be fair, the typing is definitely worse than Mr. Mimes, but I do think something comparable to Weezing could be pretty actually realistic. Now, I don't know what the stat line would necessarily be, but I think we'd probably expect to see something like a 90 in one of the offensive stats at least. I don't think that we'd really see anything too high in the defensive range, but you would still honestly make these sort of more pseudo-bulky sets, maybe throw on something like the... Actually, I think that this specific Weezing set, with like a recovery move, some sort of hazard, and then 2 attacks, would probably be the most likely set you'd see. You'd throw on Sludge Bomb for sure. If this got sketched, you would probably throw on like a Spikes or Rapid Spin. And then you might throw on something like a Fake Out too, honestly, and I think Fake Out could be really good on it. But as far as Grafaiai goes, I'm curious to see what ends up happening with it. One thing I will say is that, especially with Normal Gem being an actually really useful item in competitive, you could probably throw on like a Normal Gem Fake Out, and with something like Unburdened, you could honestly try and get up just hazard spamming as quickly as possible, or also just go for a Spikes and then try and pop the Unburdened with Sash. I think either way though, you could definitely make that work, or Mental Herb 2 could be an option, because you'd be slower than the opposing Pokemon's Taunt, and you can get up 2 sets of Spikes with that if it was to be a sketch Pokemon, or even just a set of Rocks plus Spikes. The point being is that I think that Unburdened with the sketch Pokemon would have a lot of different options, and again, I think it would set up around the Weezing comparability as far as usefulness goes. In fact, you could probably literally run the same sort of moveset, except for, again, maybe ditch Recover for something like a Taunt, or a Stealth Rocks, or really even just a U-turn could be pretty good on that. But let me know your guys' thoughts down below. What do you think would happen if Grafaiai got Sketch, or if Sketch even just became an egg move as far as Scarlet and Violet goes? And if you enjoy this type of content and want to see more like it, leave a like below and subscribe for more content just like this. I'm going to try and post vids obviously every Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and when Scarlet and Violet comes out, we'll be doing a lot more content in general than just those 3 days of the week. But with that said, let's get into our channel members, of course. Thank you, of course, very much to our channel members being Zeke0, Josh, aka Ultra Player, and Mia. You guys are amazing, and I appreciate your support a lot on the channel. With that said, I will see you guys in the next one. Until then, peace out, guys.